Tucker Carlson responds to those critical of him for interviewing Russian President Vladimir Putin. How's it going, guys? Welcome back to UnwokeThoughts. Tonight, we are talking about this historic interview between Tucker Carlson and Vladimir Putin. Now, many of you probably have already either watched the interview or seen parts of it, and definitely all of you have probably heard about this interview. But it was very, very long. I watched the entire thing like twice. I live streamed it on YouTube and Rumble, and YouTube took down my live stream. Not sure why. When they sent me the email, there was no claimant attached, and there was a couple other really large accounts that still had it live streaming. But it was a very long interview, almost 2 hours. And for the first part of the interview, almost an entire hour, Putin insisted on going into the deep history of the region and the dynamics between Russia, Ukraine, and Poland. And it was pretty interesting, I guess. It was a little bit tedious, a little bit long, drawn out right there. But the second part of the interview was a little more salient. He talked about NATO. He talked about the BRICS nations. He talked about AI, and he talked about Elon Musk, George Bush. He mentioned Donald Trump once or twice, and kind of the dynamics between the United States and Russia. And he was very critical of the United States, while at the same time acknowledging that they are a very, very powerful country. And at one point, he was talking about the media, and he said, the United States, you cannot compete with the propaganda in the media coming out of the United States, which is kind of interesting to hear out of a world leader's mouth, just from someone who lives in the United States, who is very aware of the media and what it does and the narratives that are coming out of the media. I can agree with him on that point, guys. But this interview for me wasn't necessarily completely even about the information portrayed in the interview. It was more about Tucker Carlson being able to do it, Tucker Carlson doing it, because I feel like that's what an American is. Someone who is interested to learn information, weigh information for themselves. We have a constitution. The First Amendment is freedom of speech, freedom of press. And that's important for me. And seeing a lot of people, a lot of high-level people in the United States criticizing Tucker Carlson and pushing back on him for interviewing Putin, I thought was wrong of them to do. But following the interview, Tucker Carlson had some very interesting thoughts and takeaways from this interview. Watch.
So, but Putin, for his part, again, even talking about Putin, you feel like I'm flacking for Putin. I'm from La Jolla, California. I'm not flacking for Putin. Please. I'm just trying to assess this rationally. It's interesting that he's willing to say, yeah, I want some kind of settlement. And the final thing I'll say is that if you're wondering who the lunatics are, U.S. officials have said on the record and have said to me, and are telling a bunch of people that part of the terms have to be Russia giving up Crimea. And without getting into the whole history of Crimea, here are the facts. It's, the home of Russia's warm water fleet. It's got a Russian population. They had a referendum. It chose Russia. It's part of Russia. It's where Russian wine comes from. So you can like that or not like it, but the fact is Putin would go to war, nuclear war, if it came down to Crimea. And by the way, Crimea was in Russian hands at the beginning of this war. So it's like, if you really think that a condition of peace is that Putin's going to give up Crimea, then you're like a lunatic, and they are. I mean, they want a weak leadership in Russia, and the question is, why would you want that? How is that good for the United States? I'm not defending Russia. I'm defending my own country. A weak central government in a nation with the world's largest nuclear stockpile is insane, especially a country as large and potentially fractious, with this many languages, ethnicities, religions, 20% Muslim population. You're just going to sort of let the nuclear stockpile float free and hope the best thing happens. You're a freaking nutcase if you desire that. And we are run by nutcases. The president and that poisonous moron, Toria Nuland, we're going to depose Putin. Well, then what happens? What happened in Libya when we deposed and allowed, Gaddafi to be murdered? What happened in Iraq when we brought Saddam to justice? Those countries fell apart and they've never been rebuilt again. In Afghanistan, we took out the central government and they came back. It's still run by the Taliban. So our track record of knocking out the leader, which is very easy to do, is spotty at best. Things don't always get better. And to do that to Russia, the largest landmass in the world with the largest nuclear arsenal, you're on drugs if you think that's a good idea.
So Tucker Carlson is criticizing this idea that he is some sort of Russian sympathizer. He's like, listen, I'm from La Jolla, California. Like, that's crazy talk. But at the same time here, he is weighing this information that he heard from Putin during this really long sit-down he had with him. And Putin did say that he is open to making a deal with the United States, but The United States apparently have a condition for peace, and that is to give up Crimea, which is pretty interesting because it is a part of Russia. And they want to make a deal with Russia, making this a condition, but apparently this is off the table for Russia, and they are willing to use their nuclear stockpile to defend Crimea. Now, I don't know if this is a deal breaker for the United States, but Tucker does make a good point when he brings up the nations that have been destabilized by the United States and how we probably do not want that happening in Russia, this country with the largest nuclear stockpile in the world. But one of the most interesting parts of this interview, I thought, is when Vladimir Putin brought up this meeting he had with Bill Clinton, where Russia actually almost became a part of NATO. Listen to this.
At a meeting here in the Kremlin with the outgoing President Bill Clinton, right here in the next room, I said to him, I asked him, Bill, do you think if Russia asked to join NATO, do you think it would happen? Suddenly he said, you know, it's interesting. I think so. But in the evening, when we met for dinner, he said, you know, I've talked to my team. No, it's not possible now. You can ask him. I think he will watch our interview. He'll confirm it. I wouldn't have said anything like that if it hadn't happened. Okay.
Were you sincere?
It's impossible now.
Would you have joined NATO?
Look, I asked the question, is it possible or not? And the answer I got was no. If I was insincere in my desire to find out what the leadership position was...
But if he had said yes, would you have joined NATO?
If he had said yes, the process of rapprochement would have commenced, and eventually it might have happened if we had seen some sincere wish on the other side of our partners. But it didn't happen. Well, no means no. Okay, fine.
Why do you think that is? Just to get to motive, I know you're clearly bitter about it. I understand. But why do you think the West rebuffed you then? Why the hostility? Why did the end of the Cold War not fix the relationship? What motivates this from your point of view?
You said I was bitter about the answer. No, it's not bitterness. It's just a statement of fact. We're not bride and groom, bitterness, resentment. It's not about those kind of matters in such circumstances. We just realized we weren't welcome there, that's all. Okay, fine. But let's build relations in another manner. Let's look for common ground elsewhere. Why we received such a negative response, you should ask your leaders. I can only guess why. Too big a country with its own opinion and so on. And the United States, I've seen how issues are being resolved in NATO. I will give you another example now concerning Ukraine. The US leadership exerts pressure, and all NATO members obediently vote, even if they do not like something.
But Vladimir Putin brings up this meeting he had with President Clinton and that he asked Clinton if it were possible for Russia to join NATO, and Clinton eventually said, no, it's not possible. Now, when asked if he actually would have joined NATO, if Clinton would have said yes, he's kind of evasive in his answers, but the reason he gives for why the United States said no about Russia joining NATO is kind of interesting here. He thinks it's because that Russia is such a big country, it would have threatened the dominance of NATO by the United States. But another very interesting part of this interview is when Vladimir Putin brought up Tucker's history with the CIA. And it's very interesting because I don't know if you guys know this, but Tucker's dad was a part of the CIA. And apparently Tucker tried to join the CIA. And Vladimir Putin is apparently knowledgeable of that fact. But listen to this.
With the backing of CIA, of course. The organization you wanted to join back in the day, as I understand. We should thank God they didn't let you in. Although, it is a serious organization. I understand.
Yeah, so I agree with Vladimir Putin here. I'm glad that Tucker did not join the CIA and he is instead in media. Hopefully he is not some sort of CIA asset. That would be crazy. But I thought that was a very interesting part of the interview. But Tucker Carlson is facing backlash from all the right people. Here is Hillary Clinton saying it's terrifying that there is a yearning for leaders who imprison their opponents. And Benny Johnson here, this is a tweet by Benny Johnson. He says, wait until she hears about Joe Biden. Very, very true. But listen to this.
It's more than just the political partisan advantage. There is a yearning for leaders who can kill and imprison their opponents, destroy the press, lead a life that is one of impunity, unbound by any laws. there's a yearning among certain people in our country for that kind of leadership. And I find that absolutely gobsmacking terrifying.
So it's very interesting to see how Hillary Clinton thinks here. She is saying that just because people want to hear, and a lot of people wanted to hear this conversation between Tucker Carlson and Vladimir Putin, that somehow there is a yearning for this type of leadership. And that's not the case at all. We are Americans. We value information. We value free information. We value being able to weigh that for ourselves. And Vladimir Putin is a key player in this war that is going on in Ukraine that we keep spending billions and billions and billions of dollars on. So to hear his perspective as to why the war wages on, I think is valuable and I think is important as an American and as somebody who values freedom of speech and the freedom to access information without it being censored. But this interview was huge, and this is just an idea to give you the scale of the interview. And this was a tweet by Benny Johnson, and he said, on average, per night, Fox News has 1.85 million views, MSNBC has 1.22 million views, CNN has 582,000 views. Wow, that's embarrassing. But in less than 24 hours, Tucker Carlson's interview with Putin has already 141 million views. Corporate media is dead. Wow. I think that is an indication, in fact, that corporate media is dead. And I love to see it. But what do you guys think? What did you guys think of this interview between Tucker Carlson and Putin? Do you think he should have been allowed to interview Putin? What do you think about what Putin said about Russia joining NATO and the United States wanting Russia to give up Crimea? Let me know what you think about this down below in the comments. Like and subscribe to my channel. I would really appreciate it. But until then, I will see you on the next one.